Hey everyone, thank you so much for clicking on this video of mine. I really do appreciate it. Today we've got something quite different. We have a debate. Now, how this debate came about is a film was released called Redeeming Love, which was apparently very, very controversial, and a lot of people didn't like it, and I thought it was amazing. I watched it 3 times in cinema. In fact, I actually cried every time I watched it. It was a beautiful movie. I loved the message behind it. But a fellow YouTuber that I've come to know quite well over the last few weeks, she just couldn't stand for the movie. She just couldn't. And so in this video you're about to watch, we are actually just debate not just Redeeming Love, but just cinema in a whole, and whether or not we as Christians should be a little bit more considerate about the type of content that we do consume, and just movies in general. So guys, I really hope you enjoy this debate. Hey guys, this is incredibly exciting. It's really, really cool. So, I know I'm going to butcher this name. I've already asked her, and she says it's fine. This is how English people say it. But Elize, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for reaching out. This is so fun.
Cool. So, actually, guys, I've kind of broken down a little bit of what we'll be discussing about in our intro. But Elize, will you just tell us a little bit more about why we're here?
Yeah, we're here because of the very controversial or very discussed new movie like Redeeming Love, and we have a little bit of different views, but we're both Christians and we decided to come together and talk about it.
Now, how this actually came about is I did my movie review for Redeeming Love, and so very often what happens with the YouTube algorithm is if you upload something, very often that YouTube will start recommending you very similar stuff on your algorithm. And so I came across Elize's video, and she was like, no, this is why I will not be watching Redeeming Love. And my whole review was why I really enjoyed the movie. And so I watched her reason, I watched her video, I understood her reasons, and I was just sitting there going, no, but I disagree. And so I left a very long comment on her video, and I'll paste that over the screen so you can check it out. But then afterwards I was like, you know what? I don't know if she's even going to see this comment. We have to make sure we actually discuss this. So I just sent her an email and we started communicating with one another. And so now we're here because we've had a few meetings before. We've been talking over WhatsApp. And so, yeah, we're just here now to discuss how 2 Christians can have different opinions on something. And we're just going to see how we can come together on an understanding of this film. And I think also just movies in general when it comes to Christians watching movies, because... And this is never going to turn into a fight where we start attacking one another, because then this entire thing is pointless. But yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. What do you think?
Yeah, that's perfectly how I would describe it too.
Okay, perfect. Well then I think, straight off the bat, I'm going to let you guys know I really enjoyed the movie. So do you want to break down the reasons why you haven't watched... Have you watched the movie yet? You still haven't?
No, I'm sticking to my view and video.
So do you want to break down why you haven't watched the film and your reasons behind it?
Yeah, I think my biggest key points is probably the sexual depiction and stuff, and if means justify the result. And also I think because I have my channel is all about Christian stuff, about God and how we honor God and stuff. And I think my problem is that it's being portrayed as a Christian movie, but I don't feel like it's not said it is actually a Christian movie, but Christians take it as, oh, this is our Christian movie, and that's what I have a problem with. I know it says on their website it's faith-based, but it's not Christian movie. It's not made by Christian producers, and yeah, I guess sort of when you kind of blend the faith-based with a sort of eroticism, I guess, is, for me, it's a double standard, and I just try to not watch anything that's might cause me to stumble, or I'm really trying to walk in a new way when it comes to movies, and I haven't been perfect with that. I have watched movies like that in the past, but I'm trying to be better at what I'm putting and feeding into my mind and my eyes. Is basically the overview.
Well, I have to say, I completely agree with a lot of the reasoning behind it, especially when it comes to sex scenes. Um, at the end of the day, you said you didn't want to stumble, and that is something that I can really, really respect. And especially when it comes to understanding that there are sex scenes in the movie, that's something you don't want to stumble in. Now, I can guarantee you, most people, and I can pretty much guarantee you, almost every single guy in the world has had to deal with pornography and addiction to pornography. And so, as someone that's recovered from that, I can agree with you on you never want to put yourself in a situation where temptation can take over. That's the last thing you ever want, because you've gone through this entire battle trying to recover from pornography and witnessing this sort of stuff. And so yeah, very open there, but I can agree with you. You don't ever want to stumble. But what I can say as someone who's now watched the movie is that yes, the movie depicts sex scenes, but there's never any nudity, and it's really unerotic. Like it never was like titillating or arousing. And so a big part for me is, and you said as well, like it's only a faith-based movie, it's not a Christian movie. Well, if we look at that logic, movies like Narnia, which is one of my favorite movie series of all time, that is most definitely not, gospel, but it takes inspiration from the gospel. If we look at most Christian fiction novels, none of them are gospel. It's someone that's taking faith-based elements and putting them into stories. I was having a very interesting discussion with one of my friends, Vincent, and he told me, he's like, Caleb, there's only one truth. Jesus is the truth, the gospel. And there's no such thing as worldly truth. That just doesn't exist. That's just false. That's lies. So very often you can get works of fiction that reflect God's truth. And so, for example, I have an entire video essay series, where I look at non-Christian movies and I find the Christian messages in them. And so if you look at things like The Lion King, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of parallels between The Lion King and Esther, because the truth of the matter is, like, Simba was the only person that had the right stuff to stop Scar from being king. And Simba was placed in the world at a specific time, much like Esther, to achieve a specific goal and bring peace back to the promised land. So that's a perfect example of a non-Christian movie that carries Christian themes and elements. So if a person can find a secular film with Christian themes and Christian elements, surely we can also find those in something that's faith-based. Now, I do know that you haven't watched the movie, so I don't want to get too deep into it, but there's a lot of things in the movie that balance very heavily, on faith. Now, I'll say straight away, there's a lot of faith-based movies that are most definitely not faith-based movies. I mean, there's this movie on Netflix called A Week Away, and I've also got a review for that on my channel, and I ripped that apart. I thought it was the most pointless movie ever, because for a faith-based movie, they only said the name Jesus twice, which was shocking. This is what's so great about this movie, in my opinion, is it not only shows a woman coming out of prostitution, because that's what this movie is about. It's about a woman coming out of prostitution. It's not just about that. It's about her recovery process. And I think that's something that a lot of Christians actually need to bear witness to. Because when we all become Christians, you first become a Christian, you're super passionate and you love Jesus and you think, cool, I'm never going to sin again, ever. And then you sin again and it crushes you. And that happened to me so often. And this movie deals with that in a very, very serious way. And I feel like as Christians, there's a lot of important messages and lessons we can learn from a lot of different movies that aren't necessarily Christian focused 100% of the time.
I haven't watched Lion King though, but I get what you're saying. I think I read a couple of reviews, both pros and against it, and I've also read those sites where you can actually read what the movie is about. I think actually it was a page for parents or something, if they could watch it with their kids, basically. So it literally just said everything that was in the movie, and it didn't make me comfortable. Even though you say oh, it's no nudity, but where do we define what nudity is, or how much skin is oh, that's bad, but oh, that's okay, And even though okay, you don't see directly anything, but just by like a lot of camera angles, or like, okay, a hand placed there so that you don't see, you know, it doesn't mean like that it sanctifies the material, in my point of view, though.
I agree with you. I do. And I will say, if there was one thing I could change about the movie, it would be the amount of skin you see. Because there was one period where I was sitting there going, that's a lot more than I was expecting. But I think also it's a great wake-up call to the realization that, like, prostitutes exist. It's a very, very real thing. And as I mentioned earlier, like, it wasn't titillating or arousing or anything like that. It was done to depict the fact that these women don't want to be there. And that's the truth. Very often they're sitting there in the house, as he's talking about, like, cool, we've been sold here, we don't want to be here, this isn't what we want to do with our lives. And so when we see scenes like that that make us uncomfortable, I think it's done deliberately to make us go, cool, look, there are real people out there who suffer from real situations that they don't want to be a part of. Again, what I love about this movie is how real it feels. There's this, now I cried in this movie. I'll be the first person to admit it. And I remember the first time I watched this movie was at a review screening. And so there was this woman sitting right next to me, who was like a reviewer for this massive magazine. And I remember crying like this because I was like, I don't want her to see me crying. But I cried in this scene where Angel, who is the prostitute who becomes the wife in this movie, I always cry in the scene where she decides, cool, I'm going to become a Christian. And you see her, decide to, and she takes these steps, and it's all about faith, and she's busy praying. And I always cry in that scene, which I was like, oh, that's freaking amazing. But there's a scene that my fiance cried in, and it's the scene where after she gets married, she runs away. And again, this movie and this movie is based off of a book called Redeeming Love, and the book is an adaptation, of the book of Hosea. And if you know about that movie, it's about a prostitute who just keeps running away, and the husband has to go get her. In this movie, Angel, the prostitute, a big part of her is she doesn't know how to love herself, because her entire life has been so destroyed by men using her. And so the movie is about God trying to reveal to her her own self-worth, but she refuses to accept that she has any self-worth. And I've seen this play out in many lives, because I've done a lot of outreach programs where I've worked with prostitutes, and I've seen this very thing happen, where they feel no one can love me. Why should anyone love me? And very often they resort to hurting themselves, whether that's cutting themselves or putting themselves in dangerous situations, because they almost feel they deserve it. And this series does that very well, because there's a scene where Angel decides to run away, and she goes back to being a prostitute. And then her husband goes, gets her, and brings her home. Again, that's showing it's supposed to be a reflection of God's love for us, that even though we can be running into sin, God will always go and drag us back, because it's God's redeeming love that saves us. And there's a scene now where Angel's come back from being a prostitute, and she's sitting in this river washing herself. And she's got these stones in her hands because, this is also a period piece. It takes place in the past. And she's sitting there in the river washing herself, and she's literally turning her skin raw. She's like literally ripping the skin off of her body, because she views herself as being so unpure and so dirty. And that's the scene my fiance cried in, which is a scene that never really touched me, but she could relate to that so hard, because she could see that on her own spiritual journey, this idea that, like, even though we're saved, we can still feel in our hearts that we're unclean, that we've let God down. So there's lots of different ways that this scene and this movie can reflect to Christians in different ways.
I've only watched the trailer and seen some clips on YouTube. If I go back to kind of watching stuff and the redeeming love part, I don't know, if seeing those scenes, which is obviously what I am kind of focusing more on, because I don't want to have anything that shouldn't be in my spirit. And I don't know if I would think about God's redeeming love if I watched those scenes, I kind of question the necessity of it. And I know the Bible is sexual, it talks about stuff, but it talks about it in a different way, I kind of feel like. For example, like Adam, like he knew his wife, like a child reading that wouldn't understand, you know, and it's like kind of done in a different way. And I don't think like we need to see it to understand what's going on, kind of. I know like it's kind of to maybe appeal to people, like to make it raw, I guess. But I do think like there are a lot of powerful movies that don't need to depict those things as well.
So I agree with you again. Like I was sitting there watching this movie, going, "Flip, okay, that's a little bit raunchy." Again, there was no nudity, but like some of the scenes went on for a little bit longer than they necessarily should have. But like I'm sitting here at this point going, "Cool." And I think this is also where, as we all know, Christianity is a relationship between you and Jesus. So what's fine for one person might not necessarily be fine for another person. Like, for example, I don't drink at all. Like, I just don't drink. But like, even Jesus drank wine. But that's just a personal thing I have on my heart. And I always give a little bit of it, like, cool, I just don't think God wants me to. That's why I don't drink. Also, like, I have a lot of Christian friends that, like, a lot of them swear. I don't swear. Well, I definitely try not to. So it's different strokes for different folks, because at the end of the day, it's a relationship that you have with Christ. And so I could say whatever I want about how great this movie is, but if you have this conviction in your heart where God is telling you not to watch a movie because of nudity or because of sex scenes, then you don't watch that movie. But I have to say, of all the people I've watched this movie with, now I've watched this movie 3 times. I watched it once at a pre-screening, I bought myself a ticket, and then the final time I went and I watched it with my fiance and her family. And even my fiance's mother and her gran were saying, "Oof, we didn't really enjoy those sex scenes." But then the gran was like, "But you know what? I feel like I needed to see that because it was that's the world. It's gross. It is gross." And so I think that's also something that we've got to look at as Christians. And I think this is where I might also view it differently to you, because I'm someone that actively pursues the creative medium. I think that's a big difference between the two of us, and especially our YouTube channels, is you're a Christian content creator, and I'm more of a content creator who makes content who happens to be Christian. I think that's where there's a very big difference between the two of us. Because your content is, yeah.
Look at it more like with that movie review and like kind of like that in the love for movies, I guess. But I look at it from like a different stuff, and I'm like very like Bible and stuff, and I guess like one verse says like train yourself for godliness, like in everything. That's what I try to do.
And so I'm sitting here, like, there's this movie I've watched recently called Ring of Beasts, and there's this. I know the creator of the film. His name is Cameron Scott. We actually work together, and he always talks about like this movie has Christian elements in it. And I remember watching the first time going, I don't see these Christian elements, because it's about 2 boys who grow up to be men and ultimately have to fight each other in a ring to the death. I was like, where's the Christian messaging in that? And when he gave me the behind the scenes story, because the movie is based off of, like illegal dog fights, but he wanted to like spread awareness about this message that there are people out there that literally steal these dogs off the streets, put them in a ring and make them fight to the death. Of course, he didn't have the budget to show dogs eating themselves safely, you know what I mean? So he replaced the dog characters with humans. And at the end of the day, the point of the film was stewardship over wildlife. Like, are we actually being the rulers of the world that God called us to be? So I was sitting there going, flip, okay, now when I watch it, my heart breaks completely differently, because I'm watching these 2 characters who don't want to hurt each other. They're forced to hurt each other. And that's a reality that, like, and if I look, I've got a little chihuahua. I love her with all my heart. Her name is Rose Tyler. And it was sobering to realize, like, there are people who will steal a chihuahua, throw it into a ring against a pit bull, and the pit bull will rip it apart. And they do that for entertainment. Like, where's the godliness in that? And so the film he made was made to raise awareness about that. And so I believe, like, just because a movie doesn't inherently have Jesus as the figurehead, it doesn't mean that it can't carry Christian elements or themes. There was this movie. Now, I don't know how many movies you have watched. I watch every movie. And there's this scene. Now, I remember watching Man of Steel for the first time. I watched it with my dad. That's about Superman. And there's this, when we walked out the cinema, I was like, yo, that movie was awesome. And my dad was like, yo, there was this one scene where Zod, who's actually the villain of the film, he gives this monologue where he talks about he was built for a specific purpose and he needs to fulfill that purpose. And my dad was just speaking to me about that, going like, in many ways, we should be like Zod, because God has created us with a specific purpose. And we should do everything to fulfill that purpose, whatever it is. Like, for example, Moses had to lead the people out of Egypt. Noah had to build the ark. Of course, they had other callings, and God called them to do other stuff as well. But we all have specific callings over our lives. And it took that movie, Man of Steel, and my dad really painting that image that there is someone, that we all have a calling, that we've been, like, it's literally been programmed into our DNA. Because God has given us specific dreams, desires, passions, skills, abilities that put us in a situation where only we can fulfill specific tasks. Going back to Esther, much like Esther, Esther was the only person that could fulfill that goal at that specific time. So I've looked at my life completely differently since my dad pointed out that scene to me when I was watching Man of Steel. So I do believe, and again, this is where it's different because as I just mentioned, we have different passions, different abilities. And so I have this passion to look into films and find Christian messages that you probably don't. I'm not saying like you can't do this. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I think it is just a difference of what God has placed in our hearts, because God sees us as completely unique individuals. And there have been a lot of times where I've watched non-Christian movies that have actually bettered my Christian walk with God. And I suppose that's why, like, when I saw your video where you spoke about not even wanting to watch the film at all, I was like, but what? Because there were so many good gold messages in that. And again, like, I've gotten a lot more Christian messages. Now, this is what I will say. The Bible is the only truth. 100%, like gospel. Like, the gospel is perfect. Adaptations of the gospel automatically aren't God divine. Like, they can be led in the Holy Spirit, and they can be, for example, Redeeming Love is basically a point-by-point book of, the book of Hosea. But it's not perfect. Much in the same way, like, I've got many DVDs talking about the life of Jesus, but those are just works of fiction based off of the truth, which is the Bible. But I have to say, like, there have been lots of non-Christian secular movies that have moved me in a spiritual way more so than Christian movies.
I'm not saying like with the redeeming love, since like that's our topic. Like, I'm not at all talking like to people who are not Christians, like, because they can do whatever they want to. I'm talking more specifically to Christians because, like, for me, like, yeah, why would we watch it if it's not Christian?
So do you not watch any non-Christian movies whatsoever?
I do watch some, yes. But I do want to get away from that, actually. But I have a lot, like, I don't watch horror movies, never have. Don't watch, like, anything dark or, like, killing stuff. Don't watch very, like, sexual stuff. But obviously, like, now these days, like, everything is sexual in every movie. And I don't have, like, personally, never had a problem with masturbation, never had a problem with porn. It's just a matter of, like, keeping my mind, so not, sorry, I started speaking Norwegian there. So that I don't think about these things, because, like, the Bible talks about, like, what we consume our minds is also important. And I do want to keep my heart and mind clean. It doesn't matter, like, if you do something, because it's just as bad if you think about it or ponder about it, I think.
It's literally, I was trying to explain this concept to an atheist friend of mine, because I was busy talking about, like, if you look on a woman with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart. And he was like, that makes no sense. I was just trying to explain to him, like, the bar of purity is so high because of how great God is. Like, there's no way any of us are ever going to get to heaven without the redeeming love of Jesus, because he literally paid the ultimate sacrifice. He died for all of our sins. That's how we get to heaven. But I think until you've actually realized how deadly sin is, and how dangerous it is and how Satan can use our sin to make us feel unqualified or unloved, until we realize the ultimate sacrifice that Jesus paid, we're never actually going to treat that sacrifice with any sort of reverence or respect. And I think that's something that non-believers struggle with, because if I have to tell someone like, hey, you know how you just looked at that person, like you spoke to him with anger, like you committed murder in your heart, like they don't understand that. But that's something that we as Christians are fully aware of.
I was thinking about the whole, if we talk a little bit about the Hosea part, because like obviously it's not all based on that. But maybe like for me, just like by looking at the trailer or reading the book, it feels like more it's about Michael saving her. It's not so much about God saving her. And the story of Hosea is actually very nice, and like it's touches my heart, you know. But it's not as much as it is about those two as it is about like how faithful that God is, because like he constantly like, have you read the Old Testament? How many times the Israelites, they sin against God, they rebel against God, they do so wicked things, and then like God, he gets angry at them, he redeems them, he has mercy, compassion on them, and like that's, I guess, what kind of I wanted to see, would want to see more if I like watched it or read it, because even like reading it, like I read it many years ago, but even reading it, it was like a lot, but I don't think it was maybe as visual, but still it was like very out there, you know.
I completely agree. I struggle to read the Old Testament at times because, sorry, shush, go back. Sorry, I struggle to read the Old Testament at times because it breaks my heart, especially with the story of Exodus, because you've just witnessed God performing all of these miracles, yet you still decide, hey, you know what, let's make a golden calf. That's going to be amazing. And I feel like in many ways, the Hebrew people like reflect us on our personal journeys at times, because, and maybe this is just me, I mean, again, as I said, like we have very different relationships with God, but very often I feel like the Hebrew people, we're like, when you read the Bible, you so obviously know what they're about to do is a stupid mistake. You so obviously know it, and then they still do it. And then I can go do the exact same thing, and I feel like, flip, how was I so stupid to go do this thing? And so I think very often what I've done, every time I read the Old Testament, especially the Exodus story and them going into the Promised Land, I get really almost demotivated at times, because like you guys were right there witnessing all these miracles. I think that's also where it's great that we can now have a personal relationship with Jesus. And something that I always remind myself, and this is pretty much like a lesson I can only give myself because I've tailored it to myself. It wouldn't necessarily work for other people. But there were only two people that entered the Promised Land. You know, not even Moses did. But one of them was named Caleb, and that's my name. So I cling to that. Like if God is my passion, if he is the person I pursue, if he's my number one priority, that's all I can hope to do. So at the end of the day, I think we've kind of reached this point where we've kind of understood where we both stand on redeeming love, understanding that like you don't necessarily enjoy the nudity, but also now you brought up this thing of like Michael and Angel. It's more about Michael saving Angel. And again, then I just want to say, like, firstly, Redeeming Love, the movie, is an adaptation of a work of fiction, the book Redeeming Love, which is a work of fiction that takes influence and inspiration from the book of Hosea. So it's never claiming to be the book of Hosea. But then it just goes to the points that, like, I would bring up earlier. Like, if I can find, you know, Christian messages in non-Christian movies, of course, I'm going to be able to deeply analyze, you know, the things that stick out to me. But I think what we're looking at now is two Christians, who view modern entertainment so incredibly differently. Because I'm someone that literally watches films all the time. And I will say, I think a lot of that desensitizes me. because I've watched truly horrific stuff, like gross stuff. But that's kind of like what I do as a movie reviewer. And I've watched stuff that's very, very ungodly. And I will say there are specific movies that Christians should just avoid completely, that have absolutely nothing redeeming about them. And I will say, like, will lead you down a path of temptation. And I think there are many movies out there that do exactly that. I think Satan is so incredibly smart with how he can trick people. I think the entire movie making industry, Satan has got his fingers in all of the pies. Because if you look at most modern movies nowadays, there's so many anti-God messages sprinkled throughout everything. And there's so much glorification of everything that is sinful. And so I think we do have to be very, very careful about what we consume. And I think, again, so the stance you're taking can in many ways save people from putting themselves in a situation where they watch something. But I believe, or when they watch something they shouldn't be watching. But from my side, someone who dabbles with movie making and enjoys modern movies and stuff like that, it's a matter of looking after your heart and being able to include God in everything you do, so that when you're watching something that you know isn't right, you can kind of just block it out of your, stop it from entering you. But I do believe like movies can be incredibly powerful, both in the glory of God and then, of course, in the glorification of that which is worldly and against God.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I guess like that's also where we differ, because like you look for the sort of where is the glory of God, or like what's like the meaning behind this. As for me, like I am looking more as like from a Christian like view, like why would we support this, And I think like my issue with the movie, like I'm not saying like it can't help some people, but I'm talking from a Christian view, and my issue is, I guess, that it's kind of seemed as a Christian movie. It's like advertised or like marketed as a Christian movie. A lot of people say it's a Christian movie, and that's what I have a problem about. And then it's up to each person if they want to watch it or not, and I'm just telling it from my Christian perspective, I guess. And so I also went to the movie site for Redeeming Love, and I think I wrote it down here, like it shows that there is no brokenness that love can't heal. But then I guess from my kind of perspective, it's only God who can heal our brokenness. Yeah.
So I do agree with you, because I feel, and I can say this, there was this, as I mentioned earlier, I mentioned that movie A Week Away, which is a perfect example of a Christian movie that has completely watered down its message for non-Christians. Like the movie, as I said, mentions the name Jesus twice, but also like the massive conclusion or how the movie's resolved is there's this boy that wants to leave the Christian camp. He's like, I can't be a Christian. But then he decides to go back to the camp, not because of any work that God has done in his heart, but because he has a crush on a girl there and he doesn't want to let her down. That's not a Christian message. And so I agree with you there. If you read the slogan of the movie, there's nothing that, but you can also look at it as is that not God's love? Is that not God's love that they're talking about? Because the film does ride on this entire undertone of the reason Michael is the way he is because of his relationship he has with God. And the way we're introduced to Michael is with him sitting down in the church praying. And his prayer is like, I'd like a wife, Lord. Like, I'm paraphrasing, of course. Like, I'd like a wife. And he's like, cool, I want her to enjoy fishing. I want her to have long legs. And he stands up and he walks away, but he turns around and he goes, but you know what I need. You know what I mean? He tells God, like, give me what you want me to have, what you need me to do with my life. And so he gives her Angel, or he tells Michael, like, cool, Angel's the one for you. And at the end of the day, it wasn't Michael who ended up changing Angel's life, because her transformation takes place once she's run away from Michael. She's left Michael behind. And when she's on stage again, because now she's been kidnapped, when she's on stage in front of all of these people that are wanting her to like, get naked and stuff, that's when she realizes, flip, this isn't a life I want. And she begins to pray. And that's something she's doing. And she prays. And there's this like overlay of her reaching down into this water and picking up her mother's cross, because she gave up on Christianity when her mother died. And so it's her reclaiming her relationship with Christ. And what ends up happening is she ends up escaping, the prostitute house. And she ends up working in a church for like 3 years. And in the church, she's busy helping girls get out of prostitution. And those are all things that take place away from Michael. So you do see the personal relationship with God blossoming there. And of course, the film doesn't deliberately say, she's doing this because of God. But as a Christian, you can see, cool, this is where God is working in her life. But again, if you are looking for a movie, like my same friend Vincent that was busy talking about, like there's only one truth and that's God's truth. When he went to go watch this movie, he described it as a movie that's Christian light because it has Christian themes in it, but would he call it a Christian movie? He doesn't know. But he does admit that there are Christian themes in the movie. So that's how you can look at it. It's if you are wanting a 100% Christian movie, maybe this isn't a movie for you. But if you are looking for a movie that tackles real world themes and tackles issues that many people in real life do struggle with, then I believe this is a film that you should definitely watch, because I was personally challenged. So you might notice, like, I know it's not customary for a guy to wear an engagement ring as well, but this is kind of like almost a Portuguese tradition. It's supposed to be silver, long story. But I remember watching this movie and I was just challenged so personally about the fact that I'm becoming a husband soon. How am I going to be treating my wife? Now, I can guarantee you Danny isn't going to run. Sorry, Danny's my fiance. I can guarantee you my fiance isn't going to run away from me and go, join, that specific realm of things. But it was the way Michael treated Angel that really challenged me. It's this idea that there is this process of healing she still has to go through. Because as much as the movie focuses on Angel and her journey, you can also look at it from Michael's point of view. Michael is now married to this woman who's broken, and he has to help her in whatever way he can on her personal journey with God. And I think in many ways that's something we all deal with, because we've all got friends who have broken lives. We've all got friends in the church who are children of divorce, or who, like, you'd be surprised how many people you may know that have actually lived a life of prostitution. I know personally, like, my one friend was a prostitute, and I was like, oh, not expecting that. So it's amazing to see how broken people you don't realize are broken are. And there was this point when I first became a Christian where I thought life was perfect. I didn't realize that I was broken and God still had to put me together. And so this movie does a great job of going, cool, we are broken. How can you help someone on their journey? It's not your journey that you're taking with them, it's their journey. How can you help them on their journey with Christ? Are there any closing remarks from your side?
No, like, obviously you can learn from everything, and we have different views, look at it differently, but yeah, it was very nice to talk about it.
No, I think this was a good discussion, and I think a big thing is, like, we have completely different relationships with Christ, and we have completely different views on the purpose of movies in today's world. And so we will always look at things differently. But what I think was so great here is we're both YouTubers who have our own following. And I think it is great that one of our messages might reach through to a Christian who kind of needs to hear it.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was very interesting. Like, I haven't never done this before, but it was very interesting to kind of like discuss a little from someone who differs a little bit in views, but yet very respectfully and stuff. Respectfully disagreeing, if I could call it that.
Cool, but thank you so much for joining me. I really, really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for reaching out. It was very lovely.
So guys, yes, definitely go subscribe to her channel and subscribe to mine and all of that wonderful stuff, because we do appreciate you guys watching this entire video, which has been going on for quite a while. But again, Liz, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it, and all glory to God, because at the end of the day, that's what this whole thing was for.